Hi there, well thanks for waiting. This is part 3 of What If Kamen Rider Decade was in RWBY. So let's start. Chapter 7, Metals, Underwear, Another World. Having kept to the shadows and darting through hiding spots, Eiji Hino thought he could complete his task undetected. That failed miserably. He was spotted by a patrol halfway in. His reason for breaking into the research facility was the recent surge of energy detected in the last few days. He also had another reason for sneaking in, but that was his secondary task. It sounded easier in Eiji's head, just sneak in, find out what's causing the energy surge, hopefully find the research he was looking for, get out. But there were a lot more guards inside than he had initially thought. The alarms were blaring as he incapacitated one of the security guards that have caught up to him. He had determined that running away was a better idea than staying and fight off the waves of guards that were now after him. Eiji wasn't here to fight, he was here to investigate the energy surge. He managed to get out of sight of the guards by sheer luck and ran into a large room. Hearing the guards run past the door, Eiji let out a sigh of relief and took a look around. Displayed on a short pedestal in the center of the room, a strange machine the size of a person was left there. That must be what I'm looking for, Eiji thought. Taking a second look at it, he noticed that the machine wasn't connected to anything. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door locking behind him. Attention, the dimensional machine has been initialized. All unauthorized personnel leave the testing area. An automated message was played in the room. They must have seen him enter the testing room. Uh-oh. Eiji instantly regretted sneaking in there. He tried to open up the locked door with no luck. Hearing the machine charge up, Eiji took out a black and blue rectangular belt buckle out. It had 3 circular slots in it that could fit large coins in it. Putting it on his waist, a belt came out and wrapped around him, keeping the belt buckle in place. On the right side of the belt, a strange item in the shape of an O materialized. But before he could do anything else, a purple portal appeared behind him. The portal was trying to pull him in, and it was succeeding. It wasn't long before Eiji was thrown off his feet and sent flying into the portal. Shouting in surprise, the portal closed as Eiji was thrown into another world. Nighttime, Vale Docks. Unknown to anyone, another purple portal opened up, and a man was thrown into the side of a building. Falling into a pile of crates, all Eiji saw before slipping into unconsciousness was the sea. The next morning. Again? Don't you remember what happened last time? Ruby Rose, leader of Team RWBY, asked her partner, Waishni. It was Saturday afternoon, and the team was one of the few that didn't leave for an assignment as they had completed theirs the previous week. They were allowed to go to Vale for the day and were down by the docks to see the last of the students from other academies arrive. I doubt that Blake and I will get into another argument like that again, Weiss answered back. Now, a ship had just arrived and was about to enter the port. The students from the other academies were here for the coming Vital Festival that was about to be held in 2 weeks. They were supposed to arrive earlier that week, but circumstances forced several ships to be delayed. How long are we gonna be here? I'd rather we go do something else. Yang Xiaolong, the half-sister of RWBY, said. She wasn't exactly pleased to be spending her time watching ships enter and leave. Not for long. I just want to see whoever we might fight in the tournament. The heiress responded. Done yet? There's somewhere I need to check up on. The last member of Team RWBY, Blake Belladonna, said. Her mind was occupied with something else. She had not heard anything from Tucson in a while and was getting worried. Me too. I'm supposed to go meet Penny. Ruby added. She had made plans to hang out with her mechanical friend for the day. Fine, let's get going. Weiss sighed. There was no one notable that she could see get of the boat. As they were leaving, Blake spotted something strange lying against some crates. Hey, who's that? She said, pointing at an unconscious man. The man in question was dressed rather lightly and was wearing strange clothing. What they weren't able to see was the belt buckle strapped to his waist. Hey! You okay? The man, while breathing, was unresponsive. After several attempts to get a response, the members of Team RWBY talk about their options. Should we call an ambulance? Yang asked the others, only to hear a groan from the unconscious man. Hello? Mister? You okay? RWBY was squatting in front of the man as he opened his eyes. He groaned again and brought his hand to his head, massaging it. Yes, I think so. Thank you for worrying, he said, a tired smile on his face as he tried to get up. You sure, dude? You were out for quite a bit. Yang said, whoever the man was, he was quite durable to be able to get up easily. Why were you doing sleeping out here? Blake asked worried. The docks weren't exactly the kind of place where someone would willingly stay for the night. I don't remember, he answered, still smiling as if it was a normal thing for him to do. What, do you also have amnesia? Weiss was, of course, referring to the new teacher at Beacon. The one who had sealed the breach as well as having beaten Pera. She heard that he was off with Team JNPR on their own mission. Weiss, don't be rude. Her leader reprimanded her. The man, however, didn't seem to mind her slight rudeness. No, I don't think so. Without any warning, he suddenly let a shout of surprise and searched his pockets frantically. What's wrong? RWBY's question fell on deaf ears as the man was focused on looking for something. After a moment, he let out a sigh of relief and took out something. A red medal with a hawk engraved on its side and had a golden border. It was broken into 2 pieces. Blake could have sworn that she has seen the medal somewhere before. Nothing, I'm fine now, the man answered, putting the broken medal back into his pocket. He looked at the 4 of them, now with a confused expression on his face. Where am I? He asked bashfully while taking another look around. We're at the Vale docks. It was an obvious answer. They weren't expecting his reply. Sorry, but... Where's Vale? AG had never heard of any place called Vale. He had basically traveled worldwide, from Africa to South America, and this is the first time he's heard of Vale. The girls that found him looked confused as if AG had just grown a second head. Vale. You know, one of the 4 kingdoms Vale? The blonde one said. 4 kingdoms? Once again, AG was confused. 4 kingdoms was another phrase he's never heard before. No, never heard of it, he answered truthfully. Really, did you lose your memory? The white-haired girl asked. Even though the back of his head was still aching, AG knew he had all his memories. Thinking back, the testing room's announcement did say that machine was called the Dimensional Machine. It wasn't a large leap of logic for him to realize he's in another world. Wherever he ended up, it wasn't Earth. It was then that the girls had noticed his belt. Hang on, your belt, the black-haired one quietly said. He really should ask for their names. What about it? AG glanced at his empty driver for a split second. He didn't even realize he still had it on. Do you by any chance know someone named Tsukasa Kadoya? She asked out of the blue. That wasn't a name he's heard in a while. Last time AG saw Tsukasa was during the Heisei Showa Rider War about 5 years ago. There were a couple of times he could have sworn he saw the Destroyer of Worlds, usually out of the corner of his eyes. Whenever he went to investigate, there wasn't anyone there. Tsukasa? Yes, he's a friend of mine. A friend may be pushing it a tiny bit. The man usually kept most people at arm's length most of the time. However, AG knew that if he ever needed Tsukasa's help, the passing through Kamen rider will be there. At his response, the silver-eyed girl had turned her back to him and was whispering frantically to her friends. AG couldn't keep up with what she was saying, only picking up names such as Ozpin and Beacon. That had confused the reality-displaced writer, confused. First, he wakes up in what he assumes to be another world. Then he finds out that Tsukasa was in this world and at least acquainted with the 4 girls that found him. What has he gotten himself into? Excuse me, sir? The silver-eyed girl had turned back to him and was talking to him. We think there's someone you need to meet. Triple X. The bullhead, as it was called, was flying quite fast, carrying its 5 passengers. AG was watching out at the passing landscape outside the airship. The girls he had met seemed trustworthy enough to the writer. That was the main reason he decided to come with them to meet this Ozpin. There was also the fact that they had known Tsukasa that intrigued him. So, mister. What's your name? I'm Ruby, and this is Weiss, Blake, and Yang. The silver-eyed girl had introduced herself and her friends to him, pointing at the white-haired, black-haired, and blonde ones, respectively. Me? My name is Eiji Hino. Eiji introduced himself in return. Are you from Mistral or something? Yang asked. Mistral? Was that the equivalent to Japan in this world? No, not Mistral. I'm from somewhere else. He answered back politely. Okay then, Ruby seemed to be trying to come up with a question for him. How do you know Professor Tsukasa? Professor? That doesn't sound like Tsukasa. He wasn't the type to remain in one place for too long. Not unless he was investigating something. Let's see, AG mumbled to himself. I first met him about 9 years ago. He told them. AG didn't see the harm in telling them about himself and Tsukasa. I was wandering the world, searching for something. Telling them that he was looking for a way to revive his currently deceased friend was a bit too much, though. At some point, I ran into Tsukasa. He had heard of me from somewhere and was looking for me. Why was he looking for you? Blake had interrupted him. She seemed curious about the other writer. Not sure. He said that he was there to help me with something and just left a few days later. To this day, he wasn't sure why Tsukasa had approached him. He'd heard from some other writers that Tsukasa was supposed to go from world to world and help writers. Not really a grand tale, was it? Yang said. She seemed to be hoping for a better story than that. On an unrelated note, Weiss said, Do you have the same powers as the professor? Powers? Can you also transform into a superhero? Ruby reiterated for him. She seemed rather excited at the prospect of him being a superhero. I think superhero is too big a word, Ruby. Professor Kadoya hasn't really done much to warrant calling him a hero. Weiss told her leader. As much as Eiji would like to disagree with them, he admits with how Tsukasa usually acts, he had probably done something to give them the wrong impression. But he saved people during the breach. And he also closed it and just annihilated the Grimm. Ruby reminded her teammate. Breach? Grimm? More words he didn't recognize. Whatever it was, Tsukasa was involved. That's true. The white-haired girl conceded. That sounded more like Tsukasa, helping people and absolutely defeating his opponents. Yeah, and he also defeated Pyrrha. I mean, I thought no one could beat her. Yang interrupted the two's argument. Pyrrha must be a friend of them, and Tsukasa had apparently beaten her. Guys, we're landing. Blake had mostly steered clear from the argument about Tsukasa. Just as she had said, they were landing at Beacon Academy. That was fast. Anyway, we'll show you to Professor Ozpin's office. Ruby told him cheerfully. Ozpin's office. Interesting. The gray-haired man muttered, eyeing Eiji up. The man's, or Ozpin as he known, office was at the tallest floor in the Academy's clock tower. Ruby and her friends had been asked to leave so that Ozpin could have a conversation with the new arrival. All Eiji could do at the moment was looking around the room, avoiding eye contact with the headmaster. After a few moments, Ozpin broke the silence. I've been told that you are a friend of Beacon's newest professor. Once again, Eiji questioned what was going through Tsukasa's head. Why had he decided to stay in this place? Yes, sir. That was all Eiji could say. There was something off with the man in front of him. Eiji could not put his finger on it. The man simply smiled sincerely. There's no need with the sir business, Mr. Hino. Okay then. Eiji said awkwardly. Something was seriously off with the man. Ozpin took a sip from his drink. Are you aware of how you two ended up here? Professor Kadoya mentioned something was glowing right before he woke up in the city. Eiji wasn't aware of that. At least he knew that he and Tsukasa arrived through different methods. Yes, I do. Eiji didn't have a good reason to lie to the headmaster of Beacon. That's why he decided to tell him the truth. Really now? Can you tell me more? Ozpin asked him with curiosity in his voice. Before Eiji could answer him, a ringing sound came from Ozpin's pocket. Excuse me for a second. He said, getting something out of his pocket. Yes? This is Ozpin, he said into what Eiji assumed to be a phone. He couldn't get a good look at it. Yes. I see. This went on for a bit. Ozpin put the phone back into his pocket and turned back to Eiji. Unfortunately, there is a matter that requires my immediate attention. He explained, why don't you take a walk around the beacon first? Beacon was a lot bigger than Eiji thought. The headmaster had asked the writer to leave his office less than 30 minutes ago. Since then, he had taken to explore the grounds and was drawn to a certain location. He was following a pathway and somehow ended up on a cliff overlooking a forest. The forest itself was pretty to look at, but there was a strange aura about it. Something familiar was in it. Eiji didn't know what to think of it. Many things in this world didn't sit right with him. Ozpin, the forest. Eiji now knew why Tsukasa wanted to investigate this world. Taking a glance around, Eiji tried to see any way for him to get down the steep cliffside. Something in the forest was drawing him in. With Ozpin. Ozpin was watching footage of his newest professor's fight against two mysterious creatures. Ironwood had sent one of his investigation teams to the village under the guise of a group of travelers. Their main task was to investigate the missing villagers and find the source of some strange energy readings. It was by pure chance that Team JNPR's mission took place there as well. Capturing footage of the man's abilities wasn't what they had expected to get that day. The two monsters that had appeared out of nowhere were unlike anything Ozpin had ever seen. Both were completely different from each other, as well as nearly every type of Grimm that has been recorded. They also exhibited abilities that would make even a veteran huntsman struggle against one. Fighting two of them was basically impossible. And Tsukasa Kadoya was treating the fight as if it was something he regularly did. Kamen Ride, Wizard. That had surprised him. Ozpin had not expected that he'd see another magic user outside of the maidens and her. However, the magic the writer was using was completely different than theirs. His magic seemed more. Ozpin couldn't find the right word to describe it. Kamen Ride, Build. This form looked more artificial. Ozpin was sure Atlas would love nothing more than to confiscate the belt and see what its limits were. Tsukasa Kadoya seemed to have a form for every occasion. Still, the mysterious traveler wasn't displaying his true might. He only had been using other forms than what Ozpin assumed to be his true form. The magenta form was much more powerful than the others Tsukasa had shown, at least from what Ozpin has observed. While the other forms had unique abilities, Tsukasa had shown more skill and strength when he used the Decade card. Ozpin had already theorized as to why Tsukasa wasn't showing his true powers. It was most likely the same reason why Ozpin had tried to hide the maiden's powers. Others would want that power. Even now, the story of the man who sealed the breach with strange abilities was still circulating among his students. Ozpin did not doubt that she would want to try and get it to use against him once she hears about it. She had done so with the Fall Maiden. Furthermore, Tsukasa had also been wary of Ozpin as well as distancing himself from the staff. Ozpin had thought that might be another reason why the writer was holding back. Tsukasa didn't trust him. Why would he? Ozpin had just given him what amounted to an ultimatum. Either he stays, teaches the students, and be under surveillance 24/7, or he leaves only to be under surveillance 24/7. At least with the former, Tsukasa had got something good out of it. Ozpin had been more than been drained since taking Tsukasa under his care. The council had been hounding him with requests to give the belt to Atlas for testing. Ozpin knew that soon those requests would become orders, and he would lose his triumph card in the war against her. "What do you think he's doing?" Yang whispered to Blake. The person she was referring to, Eiji Hino, was still looking for a way down to the Emerald Forest. "Don't know, stay quiet," Blake simply responded. Frankly, they had no idea as to why they were hiding from the man. The team had spotted him wandering around, and so she and Weiss were dragged by the other two to see what he was up to. It mostly out of curiosity than ill will, as they couldn't imagine the polite man doing anything shady. That seems safe enough. That was all they heard before he leaped off the cliff. Unbeknownst to them, Eiji had spotted a part of the cliff face that was less steep than any other. It doesn't seem to be climbable, but that didn't matter to him. He just needed to get down. However, Team RWBY didn't know that. All they saw was the man jumped off to what amounted to a death trap. Either from the fall or the grim in the forest. Rushing to the edge of the cliff, they saw that he had simply slid down the cliffside whilst covering his head. Within a minute, Eiji had reached the ground and was dusting off his clothes. "Mr. Hino!" RWBY called out, trying to get his attention. She was unsuccessful as he was too far away. "We have to tell someone." RWBY was starting to panic. Someone had just walked into grim territory without any way to protect themselves. "Come on, let's go." The forest was peaceful. Birds were singing, and a sweet aroma was in the air. If Eiji wasn't distracted with trying to find whatever had been drawing him in, he wouldn't have minded enjoying his surroundings. He knew it was a stupid plan, walking into unknown territory by himself. That was when he came across something. Deep scratches in trees. They weren't that big, about the size Eiji could make with the Tora claws. They made a trail for him to follow. It was without a doubt what Eiji was after. Once again, Ozpin found himself watching footage on his scroll. This time, however, it was a live video of Eiji Hino walking through the Emerald Forest. When he had told him to take a walk, this wasn't what Ozpin meant. Team RWBY had come to him with news that the man had left and went into the forest for some reason. Ozpin had instructed them to call Ms. Goodwitch to his office. While he could have done it himself, Ozpin wanted to focus on the Wanderer. He had reactivated several of the many cameras in the forest to keep an eye on him. Judging from the way he was going, it wouldn't be long before Mr. Hino would end up at the temple where Ozpin had placed the tokens for the first years. Ozpin had seen the Wanderer examine the claw marks in the trees. It wasn't from any Grimm that were native to the forest. Speaking of the forest Grimm, they hadn't appeared on any of the cameras so far and stayed away from the temple for some reason. Whatever the reason, the Grimm were avoiding the temple, Mr. Hino was going straight towards it. Reaching a clearing, Eiji saw some sort of stone temple. It was large and seemed abandoned. That wasn't really what he was here for. The odd presence he felt coming from the forest seemed to be centralized in this area. It felt so familiar to the writer. He was on high alert, trying to figure out what was drawing him in. It was when he felt something ran up to him from behind that he realized that it was a trap. Without a moment of hesitation, Eiji jumped out of the way of the thing that was attacking him. Turning around, he managed to land a strong kick to the thing's chest, knocking it back. "Who are you?" "No." "What are you?" Standing before him, Eiji instantly recognized it. It was him, or rather, Kamen Rider Oo. At the same time, it wasn't Oo. The imitation of Eiji was more animalistic, a more monstrous version of Tataba. Another Oo. Eiji felt like he's seen this monster Oo before. It was in the back of his mind, the memory of a king that had been given the corrupted powers of Oo. Eiji didn't know why he knows that, only that he has to defeat it. He took out his belt buckle from earlier, the O driver, and put it back on his waist. The driver locked on as Eiji dodged a swipe from another Oo. He retrieved 3 medals, a red hawk, a yellow tiger, and a green grasshopper were engraved on 1 medal each. Sliding in the red and green medals into the driver's first and third slot, AG kicked the fake OO back again. After inserting the final medal into the middle slot, AG tilted the driver. Taking the O scanner from the side of the driver, he scanned the medals within it and brought it to his chest. Henshin. Taka. Tora. Bada. Tatoba. Tatoba Tatoba. Eiji Hino was surrounded by spinning, multicolored medals, which accompanied the transformation. In front of him, the 3 medals he was using appear. Taka was on the top, Tora was in the middle, and Bada was at the bottom. The 3 images combined into a singular crest which flew into Eiji's chest. His body was then enveloped in energy which swiftly hardened into solid armor. His helmet was mainly black, save for the red faceplate, which looked like a hawk with its wings spread out in flight. On Eiji's forehead and simulating a hawk's beak was a red crystal. Green eyes glowed briefly before slowly fading. Running from Eiji's chin and down his neck was a red line that was connected to the top portion of the image on my chest. His torso armor had rounded shoulder pads that had yellow lines on them. Yellow lines also ran down his arms and into the yellow gauntlets he wore decorated with what looked like folded claws on the forearm. Lastly, his legs were barely covered with segmented green armor similar to that of a grasshopper's legs, connected by green lines to the lower section of the crest he bore on his chest. Standing deep in the emerald forest, Eiji Hino had transformed into Kamen Rider 00. Taking a stance, Eiji mentally prepared himself for a moment before charging another 00. The appearance of the monstrous version of one of the forms Tsukasa Kadoya had previously used had surprised Ozpin. He didn't know how long it has been in the forest or how it ended up there in the first place. It also seemed to be the reason the Grimm had been avoiding the area. The new monster was warding them off somehow. Furthermore, the fact Eiji Hino had been drawn to it concerned Ozpin. Then he transformed into the previously mentioned rider form. Ozpin didn't see that coming. Although, from the rider's reaction, he didn't seem to know what it was or where it came from either. Hearing one of his office's elevator doors open, Ozpin looked up to see Glinda had finally arrived. Where did he recognize the monster from? As Eiji fought another 00, that question kept running through his head. He had never encountered anything like it before. Yet, he had seen it before. Shaking his head for a second, Eiji refocused on the battle itself. Another 00 was proving itself to be a challenging enemy. It was dodging and countering Eiji's attack as easily as he was. Every slash Eiji made with the now unfolded Tora claws, the other 00 parried the attack with its own claws. At the very least, when his attacks do land, the other 00 took it very hard, and, similarly to the Greets and Yummy, cell medals flew out of it. On the other hand, when the monster 00 managed to hit him, it hurt a lot more than it logically should. Taking a step back, Eiji quickly re-evaluated his options. First, he could try using the Meta Jalabur to at least give himself a small advantage. He could also try to swap out medals and try to use something like Shayuta or Burakawani to fight. However, the other 00 was unrelenting in its attack, leaving him with little time to do either option. It was times like this that Eiji wished one of the birth were here. Without much else choice, he just had to wait for the perfect opportunity. Repelling another attack from another 00, Eiji waited for the right moment to carry out his plan. The other 00 was starting to really wear him down. It has just occurred to Eiji that it has been a while since he last used the powers of 00 to this extent. The last time he did was during the Enigma incident a couple of years back. Since then, he only used it rather sparingly against Foundation X's monsters. No. Eiji was sure that he fought alongside the other 18, or was it 19? Heisei riders not too long ago. Regardless of which, although the monster 00 seemed to be also getting weaker. He just had to wait a bit more. Without any warnings, a loud gunshot rang out across the forest, and something hit the other 00 in the back. Just as suddenly, something, or rather someone, came barreling out of the tree line and punched the monster 00 with enough force to send it flying into the nearby stone walls, leaving a small pile of gray cell metals behind. Hey! I don't think running into this forest was the best idea you ever had. The newcomer jokingly said. Eiji took a look at her and realized that it was Yang. Behind her, from out of the forest, the rest of Team RWBY came out. Yang! Don't just go leaving us behind. Ruby scolded her sister before turning to Eiji, sorry for being late. We had to get our weapons. As she said, the team had come equipped with new weapons. Yang had a pair of gauntlets, Blake had a gunsword hybrid that reminded Eiji of the Musa saber Kuda used, Weiss had a rapier that had a weird cylinder within its hilt, and Ruby had an absolutely large sniper with her. This day couldn't possibly get any weirder. A deep growling quickly interrupted the reunion. Another OO had gotten itself unstuck from the temple walls, not even fazed by Yang's attack. We'll talk again later. Let's focus on that first. Eiji told the others and took out the Metagaliber from somewhere. Opening his eyes, the man found himself in what appears to be a large hall. He didn't know how he got here. The last thing he remembered was being on that tower. He was restrained by some chain and was tied to a chair at the end of a long table with 3 people at the opposite end. Where am I? It was a simple question. He should be dead. Of the 3 people, the woman was eyeing him with interest. We found you unconscious within one of the halls, she answered, watching for any reaction from the man. How did you get here? It is not easy to find this place. The sound of thunder briefly took his attention off the woman, and he looked out of one of the large windows that lined the walls. A red sky, what looked like black pools with strange animals coming out, and the woman's appearance practically confirmed his thoughts. Dato Katsumi is in hell. Chapter 8, Reunion. Unknown location. The overseer was not in a good mood. Not only did the expedition team encounter a Kamen rider in the New World, but he had also destroyed 2 of their more valuable experiments. Gates and nebula gas were incredibly difficult to get a hold of. Worst of all, the reports confirmed that it was Decade. Out of all the riders, he was the most difficult for Foundation X to deal with. Had it not been for the fact that the former great leader Ashocker is usually preoccupied with other matters, Foundation X might not be as powerful as they currently are. At the moment, the Overseer would have to alter the plans he had previously made. Emerald Forest. As it turns out, the fake OO wasn't the type to be defeated easily. All the strikes and blows dealt to it by Team RWBY were either ineffective or ignored by the strange enemy. It only was focused on the true OO, who was the only one who could hurt it in any way. On the other hand, Eiji was doing his best to try and stun the another rider, if even for a moment. All he needed to do to end this battle was to try and use one of his finishers. His opponent seemed to have also realized this, seeing as how it has been very good at keeping him on the defensive. Without any opportunity to retaliate, it was obvious to him that he'll most likely lose. Ice Flower. Without any warning, the other OO was struck by glowing white bullets. From his peripheral vision, Eiji saw Ruby and Weiss were responsible for the sudden shots thanks to the former's sniper side and the latter's unusual glyph abilities that reminded him of Wizard. In addition to that, the ice bullets were also freezing parts of the monster's body. Finally, the right moment had presented itself. Taking the O scanner from his side, Eiji scanned the metals within his driver again. Scanning charge. The metals briefly glowed with energy before the glow traveled down his legs through the green lines. Once the glow reached his feet, they morphed into those similar to a grasshopper. Taking a stance, Eiji readied himself. It has been a bit since the last time he'd done this. The crest on his chest glowed along with his helmet's visors. With that, he leaped. Sometime later, when the bullhead had finally landed, Tsukasa headed straight for Ozpin's tower/office. Might as well just get things over with as soon as possible. Knowing himself, he'd probably just try to either come up with some ridiculous excuses or feign ignorance. What Tsukasa didn't expect was who else was there. Tsukasa! Eiji Hino greeted him with an ecstatic tone in his voice despite his clothes looking beat up. He wasn't sure whether another writer being here is a good thing or not. This day was getting more absurd by the hour. Professor Kadoya, welcome back. I assume you know our guest. Ozpin seemed amused at the situation. Kind of, there wasn't really any point to lie about this. Regardless, Tsukasa will still keep his cards close to his chest. How did you find him? He'll try his best to keep the conversation off himself. Miss Rose and her team found Mr. Hino here unconscious in Vale, just like what you said happened to you. Ozpin explained. Tsukasa hoped that Eiji didn't tell Ozpin anything about other worlds. That would just make things more complicated than it needs to be. After that, they brought me here to see their headmaster. Eiji chimed in. How could he still so cheerful despite the circumstances? Now then, there are more important matters for us to discuss. Great. Ozpin played footage of Tsukasa's fight on his scroll. How did he even get that? From the corner of his eyes, Tsukasa saw that Eiji seemed to be trying his best to hold back his surprise. Professor Kadoya, do you have any idea as to what you and Team JNPR encountered? Not a single clue. Currently, Foundation X has nothing to do with Ozpin or the students of Beacon. There was no point for Tsukasa to tell him anything yet. Of course, he just hoped that Eiji wouldn't spill the beans anytime soon. How about this one? Mr. Hino informed me that he doesn't have any idea what it was. Ozpin played another video, this one showing Eiji transformed and fighting something Tsukasa didn't think he would see again so soon. And another writer. Don't know either. Tsukasa said with a completely straight face. Now there was another problem for him to deal with. Ozpin stared at him for a few seconds before relaxing. Alright then, that was all we need to discuss at the moment, he said. Why don't you show your friend around? That's not suspicious at all, Tsukasa thought sarcastically. In the students' dorms. I say that those things were ancient grims. Nora added her own 2 cents. She and her team had just met up with Team RWBY. Ooh. Or maybe they were aliens that had come to Remnant to kidnap people for some sort of diabolical experiment. After a short trip to the Beacon's medical facilities, the 2 teams had returned to Team JNPR's room to talk about their day. I highly doubt it's either of those 2 options, Nora. Weiss said. How about the one you guys fought? What do you think it was? Para politely asked. While the one she and the rest of her team encountered were weird, she found the one Team RWBY fought was more interesting. Well, for one thing, that guy was tough to keep down. Yang proclaimed, no matter how hard we hit it, the thing wasn't even scratched at all. Yang, keep it down. We don't want anyone to hear about it yet. Her partner calmly said. And how about that guy you found? What happened to him? John asked. You guys said he was a friend of Professor Kadoya. Well, at the very least, they're acquaintances, Blake answered him. He was odd. What do you mean, Blake? He seemed normal to me. I mean, aside from being able to transform and that awesome sword. Ruby went off on a tangent, though she could stop herself from talking more about Eiji's abilities. Mr. Hino said he had previously traveled around the world, but he also didn't seem to know what we were talking about with the kingdoms. She explained. While nice and polite, Eiji Hino was simply confusing and too difficult to understand, especially with his powers that seemed to be out of this world. I got it. Nora interrupted them. They're aliens. That's why they're so weird and powerful. Hey, Ren. What do you think? I don't think that's it, Nora. Ren, on the other hand, was thinking about what happened in the forest. Tsukasa Kadoya most definitely knew what attacked the village and who sent them. At the moment, Ren wasn't sure if he should inform the others about this. With Tsukasa and Eiji. So, what exactly are you up to in this world? Eiji asked Tsukasa. They both had just left Ozpin's office with the simple order for the latter to show the former around. Not right now, I'll tell you later. That's the library over there. Tsukasa lazily pointed at the said building before moving on. It was obvious that he wanted to get this over with as soon as possible. For what reason, AG wasn't sure yet. "Excuse me, Professor Kadoya." AG heard someone call out. Whoever it was, Tsukasa seemed to recognize the voice. Within moments, 3 people who AG assumed to be students walked up to them. 2 of them seemed to look apologetic while the third, a girl with long dark hair and red-orange eyes, was dragging them. "My teammates have something to say to you." The third one explained and looked at the other 2. "Ahem, we wanted to say that we are really sorry about what we did yesterday." The 2 apologized nervously. AG was completely confused as to what was going on or what they were talking about. Tsukasa, however, was suspicious of them. From how they acted, Tsukasa knew they were the type who would return just to apologize. They want something. Just in case, he put his hand on the pocket where he kept the Neo Deca driver and responded. "As long as you 2 don't do anything like that again." Tsukasa kept an eye on the still confused-looking AG to make sure that they wouldn't try swiping the OO driver instead. While it was extremely unlikely that they had learned that AG was also a Kamen rider, it didn't hurt to be cautious. "How did you 3 even know I had returned?" "Word gets around quickly, Professor." Some other students saw Miss Nikos arriving with many injuries along with her team. The dark-haired girl, who Tsukasa assumed to be Cinder Falls, answered. Cinder had been one of the only few students who not visited any of the other classes here in Beacon. That was already suspicious, especially as Mercury and Emerald had been in most of the combat classes he, reluctantly, teaches but very rarely even leaves the dorms. What was up with that? Did you run into some Grim or something? Mercury asked before promptly getting elbowed by Emerald. I apologize for him, sir. He doesn't quite know when to shut up. She bowed again. Whether he was genuinely curious or was fishing for information, Tsukasa wasn't sure yet. Regardless, we best go off before the cafeteria gets too crowded. With that, Cinder Falls left along with her teammates. Hey, AG. Yes? Start making a list. Later that night, teacher's dormitory. Sorry about imposing on you like this, Tsukasa. AG said. Right now, they were in Tsukasa's room. Ozpin had requested Tsukasa to allow AG to stay in his room while they get the newcomer's new room ready. It's better like this. We have much to talk about, Tsukasa simply responded. Assuming that Ozpin had not placed any sort of bug in his room, they could freely talk about current events. How did you get here? Well, I was investigating one of Foundation X's facilities. I heard rumors of some sort of energy coming out of that place, so I broke in there. AG started explaining. Without any plans? That was rather sloppy of you. I had a plan. It just sort of fell apart the second the alarms rang, AG admitted sheepishly. Anyway, I ran into one of their testing rooms and got thrown into this world. Tsukasa thought about AG's story for a second. Everything mostly lined up with what those Foundation X members in the forest said. They had mentioned some sort of machine that allowed them to come to this world and back. Tsukasa? How about you? Why are you here and teaching? He wasn't surprised that AG was asking that. I woke up in the city, decided to stick around and figure out what was going on in this world. He gave a simplified explanation. Okay then. So, what was that monster that I ran into in the forest? Right. That is going to take a while to explain. In an unknown place. Eternal. Maximum drive. With a single kick, the fourth and last of the large black imitation of an animal destroyed. Standing in a small crater was a Kamen rider. His suit was mostly white with designs of blue flames reaching from his forearms to his hands. His helmet was similar to that of an owl with a trident-shaped crest/horn. Between his yellow eyes was an orange crystal. Strapped along his body were several ports the size of large USB sticks, and wrapped around his neck was a black cape-like scarf. Finally, on his waist was a belt buckle with the right side having another slot in it. On his side was the 25th slot with a white flash drive with the letter E labeled on it. Hearing clapping, the mysterious Kamen rider turned to his left to see the woman who had found him along with the mustached genius and scorpion-tailed psychopath watching his fight. I must say, you are incredibly skilled to be able to take out 4 of my greatest creation with such ease. She spoke. Yes, but what I truly want to know is how such abilities are contained in that USB drive. The man known as Arthur Watts said with fascination in his voice. It didn't really matter to the white Kamen rider, he simply took the eternal Gaia memory to complete his goals. Taking off the lost driver, his armor disappeared in a gust of wind. Whatever this place is, Katsumi Data was very much intrigued. To be continued.